Hello everyone. Today I want to talk about a new show on my YouTube channel. Of course, there's already Gypsy Jazz Replays and Gypsy Jazz Top 10s, and the reception to those two shows has been great. So we're gonna make new episodes for sure. But I'd like to add a new show, a shorter format, and one that I can shoot while traveling alone, called Gypsy Jazz Profiles. The concept is as follows. There will be one on-screen guest, and I will be off-screen conducting an interview with them. And the guest can be a musician of any instrument, or a luthier, or a festival or concert organizer. Basically anyone who has a deep connection to Gypsy Jazz or the Gypsy Jazz scene. And the unique angle of the interview will be completely dependent on the guest. So sometimes it can be lighter with funny anecdotes, or sometimes it can be more serious, talking about music theory or instrument technique. And my first guest is Alban Claret. He's an amazing modern jazz guitar player who has been getting into Gypsy jazz since 2 years. So naturally, the angle of this interview will be the differences between those two styles and the difficulties one might encounter if you have to switch between modern jazz and Gypsy jazz constantly. So let's get to the episode, and I hope you'll enjoy it.
So I listened to Django Reinhardt for the first time when I was 15, and I really liked it, and I was really impressed because at that time I was only playing rock music, and I couldn't imagine that a guy could play like that, like improvise such great ideas and so like rich and avant-garde thing, even though it was, let's say, old music. And so I decided to practice it, to learn a couple of solo, a couple of tunes, and I really liked it. But even though I could, let's say, play the solo, but the improvisation part was really, really hard, and I couldn't understand how to do it. It was too hard for me, which scale or how to use the scale and things. And when I reached 18 years old, I decided to study music really seriously, and I went to a couple of conservatoires, and I started learning, let's say, modern jazz. And I was with like a gypsy guitar, and they told me, no, you can't learn gypsy jazz here. It's too it's not rich enough, or you don't have enough possibilities in that genre, so we won't teach you this one, so you have to stop and see that modern jazz is better for you. So I stopped playing gypsy jazz and went for modern jazz, which also was really attractive and still really attractive, and I learned a lot in that style, in that genre. But yeah, it's so many years passed, and then so after 10 years, which means like 2 years ago, I rediscovered gypsy jazz. I always knew this style, and I always listened to Django and things. And let's say during my modern jazz practice, like every morning I will put a recording of Django Reinhardt and improvise over it. But I always had something with Django Reinhardt. But I didn't really feel like playing this genre again. Like I was not traumatized, but like touched by what my teacher would tell me that gypsy jazz is too simple. But then, so 2 years ago, I realized that this genre is pretty amazing, and then I really wanted to learn it seriously and really like dig it, like be into it. And that started with Samoa. So that's when I arrived to Samoa for the first time, and I was completely blown up. It was amazing, amazing experience. Well, the first thing is that it's not the same guitar, so the setup are completely different. So a gypsy jazz guitar has a really small strings, really thin strings, while the jazz guitar has a bigger strings. Also, my archtop is an 18-inch guitar, so it's pretty voluminous, while this one is pretty small. And I will say that the way you phrase and how you place your notes rhythmically and the flow of the lines, that's the first thing that is really different. And the second thing is the thinking. So all the changes like in jazz you have much more changes than in gypsy jazz, and this is can be hard if you switch, like you play 2 weeks of gypsy jazz and switch suddenly to jazz. The few first days are pretty hard to change your thinking, especially that the musician you play with have been only playing jazz or gypsy jazz before. So if you play after a saxophonist that have been just transcribing some John Coltrane or Stan Getz things, he's really sharp with all those little subtle change in the harmony, and then you might not be as sharp because you were more into Django way of expression. So that's a really hard thing, I guess, for me. So the fun fact about creating a sound on the guitar is that when I was still at the conservatoire playing like only bebop, I thought the bigger gauge of the strings and the harder you will like put pressure with your right hand on the string, like would produce a better sound or richer sound or anything good. Actually wasn't good, and I realized it by playing gypsy jazz, which, let's say, it's fun fact, because normally you will say that you put more pressure or more string in gypsy jazz, and gypsy jazz is like a really powerful style. Okay, it is, but the mechanic of your right hand in gypsy jazz has to be light, and you should not put any pressure, and the strings are really thin, so it resonates like more. So I learned that out of gypsy jazz and realized that my jazz technique was a dead end, or at least I didn't really like that way of playing. So my playing and my touch changed a lot in jazz thanks to gypsy jazz. Yeah, in one hand the pompe looks easy, and it is easy, but in other hands it's really hard. Like it takes a whole life to get it right, like to have it completely right, like good swing, good sound, not stiff at all, and then not slowing down and not really rushing. Like really good pompe with good sound is almost impossible to get, to be honest. So I'm still practicing la pompe, and I think I'll practice all the time. And anyway, it's a great feeling to play that rhythm, and I think it's harder than you think it is. Well, I don't really like the idea of a division within the style. Like, I think it should be for everybody the same. Like, it's a pity to say old style or new style, because then you start to have some misconception about the music and the style. Let's say Django Reinhardt is the creator of gypsy jazz, and so now some people dislike him because he's too old for the new genre, and then it's disconnecting the music from where it really comes from its roots. So first, I will not divide into style, but I like them both anyway. So I think it's really important to stick to this, let's say, old style, because it's where you learn the basic, the sound, where it comes from, the message of the music. And of course, we always have to live with our time. So we are not in the 40s, we are in 2016 now. So it's normal to adapt and change your playing, but you should never forget where the music comes from. When you learn jazz guitar, like let's say modern jazz guitar in the conservatoire, your eyes are turned into people like Kurt Rosenwinkel, Peter Bernstein, Lageland, Adam Rogers, and you don't see any connection of Django Reinhardt and gypsy jazz style to those guys, you know. So I think it's why in the first place they are not really interested into this gypsy jazz style, because it's really there is a big distance between the two styles. And then if you really wanna, let's say, succeed in the modern jazz playing, maybe learning gypsy jazz would be a waste of time. So maybe that's one of the reasons the modern jazz guitarists don't want to learn this style. Also, I mentioned just before in the video that most of the time the school reject this style or dislike it. I mean, many reasons. And but also gypsy jazz seems pretty easy when you listen it, but once you try to play it good or right, it's damn hard. And then you don't feel like spending all those hours in learning the genre. So also I think it needs a lot of dedication and discipline to be able to play the two styles, like jazz and gypsy jazz. So I think a lot of people just don't wanna learn both, so they just prefer to stick to one. Well, to be honest, I've been really struggling, and this two last year I've been, now less since January, but until I've been practicing only gypsy jazz. I don't know how many hours, I wasn't really counting, just all the time. And but my jazz really suffered. So for a year I didn't go to jam session. I was barely playing jazz gig because I lost a lot. Actually now I realize I didn't lose anything, but during that time when I was only practicing gypsy jazz, my connection with jazz was like rusty, so I couldn't just arrive to a gig and play as good as I wanted. I needed like a week of only jazz practice to get back in shape. And so I decided just to go to gypsy jazz to try to create some kind of solid and steady basic technique. And now, so since January, I'm more or less happy with it. I can always improve it, but I'm happy I can do more than before. So now I just, every time I have a gig, I practice for the gig. So if I have a jazz gig, I practice jazz. If I have a gypsy jazz gig, I practice gypsy jazz. And that's how I function now.